I knew something was wrong the moment Theodore wouldn't look me in the eye the morning after his bachelor party. Not just hungover wrong. Not. I drank too much and made a fool of myself. Wrong. No, this was quieter. He kept rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to erase something from his mind. Like if he pressed hard enough, it would come back, or disappear completely. Dude, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter, watching him pour himself coffee he clearly didn't want. You look like you just came back from war. He let out a weak laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. I don't remember anything, he said. That made me pause. Anything? I asked. He shook his head, staring down into the mug like it held answers. Bits and pieces. Shots. The club. Someone losing a shoe. But after that, he exhaled slowly. Nothing. It's just gone. I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. Because I remembered everything. And that was the problem. Theodore and I had been friends for years. The kind of friendship that just stuck. We met in college, bonded over stupid late-night conversations and cheap takeout, and somehow never drifted apart. He was the stable one. The guy who had his life mapped out early. Good job, long-term girlfriend, now fiancé. The bachelor party was supposed to be the final wild night before he settled into that version of his life permanently. And honestly, it started exactly like you'd expect. Too many drinks. Too many bad decisions. His friends hyping everything up like it was some once-in-a-lifetime event. Theodore wasn't even that wild of a guy, but that night, he let go. I remember watching him laugh harder than I'd ever seen. Arms slung around my shoulders at one point, pulling me into some stupid group chant. His face flushed, eyes brighter, looser. And then, somewhere along the way, things shifted. It was subtle at first. He started sticking closer to me. Not unusual, we were close, but there was something different in the way he looked at me. Like he was trying to focus, like I was the only steady thing in a room that kept spinning. You good? I asked him at one point, when he leaned a little too heavily against me. Yeah, he said, but his voice was softer than usual. Slower. Just stay with me, all right? I laughed it off back then. Where am I gonna go? But he didn't laugh. He just nodded, like that answer mattered more than it should have. By the time we left the club, most of the group had split off. Some went to chase food. Others disappeared with strangers. Typical bachelor party case. It ended up just being me and Theodore walking back toward the hotel. The night air had cooled things down a little, but not enough. He was still out of it, steps uneven, shoulder bumping into mine every few seconds. Ronnie, he said suddenly. The way he said my name made me glance over. Yeah? He didn't answer right away. Just kept walking, slower now. Then, quieter. You ever feel like you're about to mess everything up? I frowned. That's a very drunk question. I'm serious. I could hear it in his voice. That edge. That honesty people only seem to reach when they've had too much to drink and not enough distractions. I sighed. Yeah. Sometimes. He nodded like that confirmed something for him. We walked the rest of the way in silence. Back at the hotel, things should have ended there. He should have crashed in his room. Slept it off. Woken up with a headache and a few embarrassing stories. That's how these nights are supposed to go. But instead, he followed me to my door. I remember turning, confused. Your room's the other way, man. I know. He didn't move. Just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to decide something. And I swear, even now, I can still see that exact moment, because that's when everything crossed a line neither of us had ever even talked about before. You said you'd stay, he muttered. I blinked. I meant at the club, Theo. I know what you meant. There was a pause. Then softer. I just don't want to be alone right now. That part got me. Because underneath the alcohol, underneath whatever confusion was going on in his head, that sounded real. So I stepped aside and let him in. And that was the first mistake. Back in the present, Theodore was still standing in my kitchen, completely unaware of how much of that night lived in my head. "I hate this," he muttered, dragging a hand down his face. "I feel like I lost control or something." I let out a quiet breath. "Maybe nothing that bad happened," I said. He looked at me then, finally meeting my eyes. And for a second, just a second, something flickered there. Recognition? Instinct? I don't know. But it was enough to make my chest tighten. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Maybe." Except I knew better. Because he didn't remember anything. Except one thing. And he was getting closer to it. The thing about memories, especially drunk ones, is that they don't come back all at once. They creep in. Slow. Fragmented. Dangerous. And I could see it happening to Theodore right in front of me. He kept glancing at me like I was part of a puzzle he didn't know how to solve yet. "You stayed with me, right?" he asked suddenly. My grip tightened slightly around my own coffee mug. "Yeah. I remember that," he said, frowning. "Walking back. Talking about something. Life-ending mistakes," I said lightly. A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Yeah, that sounds like me." But then it faded just as quickly. "And then I remember being at your door." My heartbeat picked up. I shrugged, forcing casual. "You didn't want to be alone." I said that? "Something like it." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. Then quieter. "Did I do anything weird?" There it was. The question I knew was coming. I could have lied. Honestly, I probably should have. But the problem was, I didn't actually know how to answer that in a way that wouldn't make things worse. So I settled for the safest version of the truth. "You were drunk," I said. "You needed somewhere to crash." "That's it." He studied me for a second too long. Like he was checking for cracks in the story. Then he exhaled. "Right. Okay." But I could tell, he didn't fully believe it. What he didn't remember was what happened after he walked into my room. I remember it way too clearly. He didn't even bother pretending he was fine once the door closed. Just kicked off his shoes halfway across the room and dropped onto the bed like his body finally gave up. "Damn," he muttered, staring up at the ceiling. "Everything's spinning." I laughed a little, grabbing him a bottle of water. "That's usually how alcohol works." He huffed out a weak smile but didn't argue. Instead, he pushed himself up slightly, reaching for the bottle, and that's when he misjudged the distance. His hand brushed mine. Nothing crazy. Should have been nothing. But he didn't pull away. Neither did I. It was one of those moments where time stretches in a weird way. Where your brain is screaming that this is normal, just a drunk mistake, but your body doesn't quite agree. His fingers stayed there, loosely wrapped against mine. Warm. Unsteady. Intentional. "You're a good friend, Ronnie," he said quietly. I swallowed. "Yeah. You too." But he shook his head slightly, like that wasn't what he meant. "No, I mean it," he murmured. "You always show up. You don't disappear when things get real." Something about that hit deeper than it should have. I tried to brush it off. "You're drunk, man." "Maybe," he said. But he didn't let go. Back in the kitchen, Theodore shifted his weight, restless. "I keep getting this feeling," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Like I forgot something important." I forced a small smile. "Probably just your dignity." He huffed out a quiet laugh, but it didn't stick. "No, it's not that." His eyes flicked back to me again. And this time, I saw it more clearly. That pull. That almost memory. "I remember being close to you," he said slowly. My chest tightened. "Well, yeah," I said. "You were practically leaning on me all night." "That's not what I mean." Of course it wasn't. He stepped a little closer, like distance was suddenly bothering him. "I mean, really close." There was a pause. Heavy. Charged. And I knew exactly which part of the night was starting to come back to him. Because after that moment on the bed, things didn't stop. They escalated. Slowly. Unintentionally. But definitely not accidentally. He shifted closer, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like the space between us wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Stay, he murmured again. I'm not going anywhere, I told him. But he shook his head barely. Not like that. And before I could even fully process what he meant, he leaned in. Not rushed. Not sloppy. Just close. Close enough that I could feel his breath. Close enough that if either of us moved even an inch. Ronnie! His voice snapped me back to the present. I blinked, realizing how quiet the kitchen had gotten. He was standing right in front of me now. Closer than before. Too close. What happened? He asked. Not joking anymore. Not casual. Just direct. And the worst part? He wasn't asking because he had no idea. He was asking because some part of him already knew. I should have lied. Looking back, that was probably the last clean exit I had. Theodore standing there, close enough that I could see the faint redness in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He was giving me a chance to downplay it. To brush it off like nothing. But instead I hesitated. And that hesitation said more than any answer I could have given. His expression shifted almost immediately. Not confusion. Not anymore. Recognition. We kissed, didn't we? He said quietly. It wasn't really a question. My chest tightened. I let out a slow breath, running a hand through my hair. Yeah, I admitted. Silence. Not the comfortable kind we'd always had. This one was sharp. Heavy. Like the air between us had changed and neither of us knew how to adjust to it. Theodore stepped back slightly, like he needed space to think. Okay, he said under his breath. Okay. I watched him pace once across the kitchen, then stop, pressing his hands against the counter. That's fine. He muttered, more to himself than to me. I was drunk. That doesn't mean anything. I didn't respond. Because if it hadn't meant anything, we wouldn't be standing here like this. He exhaled sharply, then looked back at me. Right? There it was. The question he didn't want answered. I held his gaze for a second too long. It wasn't just a random thing, Theo. His jaw tightened. I was drunk, Ronnie. I know. So I didn't know what I was doing. That's not true. That hit a nerve. I don't even remember it. He snapped, frustration slipping through. So how can you say that? Because I was there. Because I saw it in his face. Because I felt it in the way he held on to me like I was something he didn't want to lose. But I didn't say all that. Instead, I said the one thing that mattered. You knew it was me. That stopped him. Completely. His expression shifted again, something quieter this time. Less defensive. More uncertain. What? You said my name, I said, keeping my voice steady. More than once? He stared at me. And I could practically see the memory trying to piece itself back together. Because after he leaned in, he didn't pull away. Not right away. It wasn't some messy, accidental thing. It was slow. Careful, even. Like he was testing it. Like he needed to know what it felt like. And when I didn't stop him, that's when everything changed. I remember the way his hand tightened slightly against mine. The way his breathing shifted deeper, heavier, not from the alcohol, but from something else entirely. Ronnie, he said again, quieter this time. Like my name meant something different in that moment. Like it wasn't just familiarity anymore. I should have stopped it. I knew that even then. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want to. And neither did he. Back in the kitchen, Theodore looked like the ground had just shifted under him. I said your name, he repeated. Yeah. He let out a shaky breath, dragging a hand down his face. That doesn't. He started, then stopped himself. Didn't what? Didn't mean anything? Didn't count? He didn't finish the sentence. Because he couldn't. Instead, he looked at me again, slower this time. Like he was really seeing me for the first time since he walked in. And after that? He asked quietly. I hesitated. This part. This was where things stopped being easy to explain. Because a kiss could be written off. Blamed on alcohol. Ignored. But what came after? That was harder to pretend away. You didn't stop, I said. His throat moved as he swallowed. Neither did you, he pointed out. I didn't argue. No, I said. I didn't. Another silence. But this one felt different. Less like avoidance. More like realization. Theodore leaned back against the counter, staring at the floor like he was trying to reassemble a version of himself that made sense again. My wedding is in 2 weeks, he said finally. There it was. The real weight of it. Not just what happened, but what it meant. I know. And I don't even know why I. He cut himself off, shaking his head. This isn't me. I didn't answer right away. Because that wasn't something I could decide for him. But I also wasn't going to let him rewrite it into something it wasn't. You don't have to figure that out right now, I said. His eyes snapped back to mine. Then when? I held his gaze. That depends, I said quietly. Do you actually want to remember, or just forget it happened? That landed. Hard. And this time. He didn't look away. Theodore didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking at me like I'd just handed him 2 completely different versions of his life, and told him to pick one. Of course I want to remember, he said finally, but there was hesitation in it. Not confidence. Not certainty. Just pressure. I nodded slowly, watching him. Then don't lie to yourself about it, I said. That hit harder than anything else I'd said so far. His jaw tightened, but he didn't snap back this time. Didn't deflect. Instead, he pushed off the counter and started pacing again, slower now, like each step was part of him trying to process something he couldn't avoid anymore. I'm not lying, he muttered. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You just said it didn't mean anything. I said I was drunk? Yeah, I said calm. You were. But you weren't unconscious, Theo. You weren't out of your mind. You were talking. Thinking. Deciding. He stopped walking. Turned to me. And you're telling me I just decided to, what? Suddenly change everything about myself in one night? There it was. The real fear. I shook my head. No. I'm telling you, something that was already there didn't get ignored for once. Silence. Heavy. Sharp. His expression shifted again, defensive walls trying to come back up, but they weren't holding as well now. That's not. He started then stopped. Because even he didn't sound convinced. What he didn't remember yet was how it kept going after that first kiss. Because it didn't stop at curiosity. It didn't stop at confusion. If anything, it deepened. I remember pulling back first. Just slightly. Enough to look at him, to check, to make sure he understood what was happening. Theo, I started. But he didn't let me finish. His hand came up to my neck, not rough, not desperate, just firm enough to keep me there. Don't, he said quietly. That word stuck with me. Not stop. Not wait. Just don't. Like he didn't want the moment broken. Didn't want logic stepping in and ruining whatever he was finally allowing himself to feel. You're drunk. I told him anyway, because I had to. I know. You might regret this. A pause. Then softer. Then let me regret it later. That should have been the second moment I stopped it. But again, I didn't. Back in the kitchen, Theodore let out a sharp breath, like something had just clicked into place. I remember saying something like that, he murmured. My eyes flicked up to his. Yeah? He nodded slowly, frowning. Not the exact words, but that feeling. Like I didn't want to think about consequences. I didn't say anything. Because that was exactly it. He ran a hand through his hair again, pacing once more before stopping right in front of me. And you? He asked. You just went along with it? There was an accusation in his tone. Not fully. But there was something close to it. I held his gaze. You want me to lie? No. Then yeah, I said. I did. A beat. I wanted it too. That landed differently. Not like the other things. This one shifted the balance. Because now it wasn't just about what he did. It was about both of us. Theodore looked away first this time, exhaling slowly. Jesus! The memory hit him in pieces now. I could tell. Not everything. But enough. Enough for his body to start remembering what his mind couldn't fully replay yet. Because there's a difference between forgetting details and forgetting how something felt. You were close, he said quietly, almost to himself. Like really close. I didn't move. Yeah. His eyes flicked back to mine, something unsettled in them now. And I didn't push you away. No. Another pause. And you didn't stop me. No. That silence again. But this one wasn't confusion anymore. It was tension. The kind that builds when two people are standing in the aftermath of something neither of them can undo. My fiancé called me this morning, he said suddenly. That caught me off guard. I frowned slightly. Okay. I didn't pick up. That said more than it should have. Why not? I asked. He hesitated. Then shook his head like he didn't even have a clean answer for himself. I don't know, he admitted. But I did. Or at least, I had a pretty good idea. Because forgetting a drunken mistake is easy. Forgetting something that felt right in the moment? That's a lot harder. Theodore looked at me again. Really looked this time. Not like a friend. Not like someone safe and familiar. But like he was seeing a version of me that had always been there, and he just never allowed himself to acknowledge it. This doesn't make sense, he said quietly. I shrugged slightly. Not everything does. That's not good enough. He shot back, frustration creeping in again. I don't just act on things like that. You did. I was drunk. And you meant it. His jaw tightened. You don't get to decide that for me. I stepped a little closer. Not aggressive. Just enough. I'm not deciding, I said quietly. I'm reminding you. That did it. Because this time, he didn't step back. And that was the first sign that this wasn't over. Neither of us moved. That was the part that stuck with me the most after everything, how neither of us tried to create distance anymore. Because up until that moment, there had always been some excuse. Alcohol. Confusion. Memory gaps. Now, we were both fully aware. And still standing there. Theo. I started, quieter this time. He didn't answer. Didn't look away either. His eyes kept flicking between mine like he was trying to find something, an answer, a reason, anything that would make this simpler. You should probably go, I said. Not because I wanted him to. But because I knew if he didn't, things were only going to get more complicated. His jaw tightened slightly. Yeah, he said. But he didn't move. A few seconds passed. Then a few more. You're not going, I pointed out. I know. That almost made me laugh, but nothing about this felt light enough for that. Instead, I exhaled slowly. Theo, your wedding is in 2 weeks. I know. You have a fiancé. I know, Ronnie. His voice was sharper now, not angry, but strained. Like hearing it out loud made it worse. Then what are you doing? I asked. That question hung between us. Because there wasn't a simple answer. Not one he could say without admitting something he clearly wasn't ready to face yet. I don't know, he admitted finally. And for the first time since this conversation started. That sounded honest. I could see it in him now. The shift. It wasn't just about remembering anymore. It was about reconciling the version of himself he thought he was, versus the version of himself that had kissed me and didn't stop. You keep saying I meant it, he said after a moment, quieter now. But how can you be so sure? I held his gaze. Because you didn't hesitate. That landed harder than anything else. His brows pulled together slightly. I was drunk, that doesn't. You hesitate over everything, Theo. He stopped. That clearly wasn't what he expected. You overthink, I continued. You plan. You second guess. That's who you are. His expression shifted, defensive, but listening. And that night? I said. You didn't do any of that. Silence. You didn't ask questions. You didn't pull back. You didn't even pause to think about what it meant. I stepped a little closer again. And that's how I know it wasn't random. His breathing changed. Subtle. But noticeable. Because that was the part that stuck with me the most too. Not just that it happened, but how easy it felt. Not messy. Not chaotic. Not like some reckless mistake. It felt natural. Like something that had been sitting just under the surface for a long time. Waiting. And the alcohol didn't create it. It just removed whatever was holding it back. I don't like that, Theodore muttered. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Which part? That you're so sure. I shrugged a little. I was there. So was I. He shot back. And I don't remember half of it. That doesn't mean your body doesn't. That made him freeze. Because he knew exactly what I meant. You don't forget everything. Not really. There are pieces that stay. Sensations. Reactions. The way something felt in the moment, even if the details are blurry. You're saying I felt something, he said slowly. I'm saying you still do. That shifted the air between us instantly. His eyes snapped back to mine. And this time, there was no confusion in them. Just tension. And something dangerously close to acknowledgement. That's not fair, he said quietly. Why? Because I don't know what that means. I nodded slightly. Yeah, I said. That's kind of the problem. Another silence. But this one wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of us were saying. His fiancée. The wedding. Years of identity and expectations. And then, one night that didn't fit into any of that. One night that contradicted it. You think I'm about to ruin my entire life over one night? He asked suddenly. I didn't answer right away. Because that question? It wasn't really about me. It was about what he was afraid of. I think, I said carefully, you're trying to decide if it was just one night, or something you've been ignoring. His jaw tightened again. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. It's not. That answer didn't help him. If anything, it made it worse. Because now he had to actually think about it. Not dismiss it. Not bury it. But consider it. And I could see it all over his face. That internal shift. That slow, uncomfortable realization that this wasn't as simple as he wanted it to be. I should go, he said finally. This time, he meant it. I nodded. Yeah. He moved toward the door. Hand on the handle. Then stopped. Of course he did. I didn't say anything. Just waited. Because I already knew. He wasn't done. Why didn't you stop me? He asked, without turning around. There it was. The question underneath everything else. I exhaled slowly. You really want the answer to that? Yeah. I watched him carefully. Because I've wanted to do that for a long time. That hit. I saw it in the way his shoulders tensed. The way his grip on the handle tightened just slightly. You could have said no, he said, quieter now. I could have. And you didn't. No. He turned. And the look in his eyes now. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't panic. That was something else entirely. Something heavier. Something real. That changes things, he said. And yeah, it did. Theodore didn't leave. That was the first thing that really settled it for me. He was still standing there, hand on the door, but whatever momentum he had built up to walk out, it was gone. That changes things, he repeated, quieter this time. I didn't respond right away. Because I knew what he meant. Before, this could have been written off as a drunken mistake. Something he did, something he could compartmentalize and move past. But now it wasn't one-sided. Now it wasn't just confusion. Now it had history. And that made it real in a way he couldn't ignore. You've wanted that? He asked, turning fully toward me. There wasn't judgment in his voice. Just something careful. Measured. Yeah, I said. No point softening it now. For how long? I let out a small breath, glancing away for a second before meeting his eyes again. A while. That was enough. He didn't need a timeline. Didn't need details. Because the implication alone shifted everything between us. Why didn't you ever say anything? He asked. I gave a small, humorless huff. Because you had a girlfriend. Then a fiancé. Because you're you. That doesn't mean. It does. I cut in, not harsh, just honest. You were never an option, Theo. Not in any real-world sense. That hit him in a different way. Less defensive. More internal. Like he was realizing something about himself he hadn't considered before. Except that night, he said. Yeah, I replied quietly. Except that night. He walked back into the kitchen slowly. Not pacing this time. Just grounding himself. I stayed where I was, watching him, trying not to read too much into every small shift in his expression, but it was impossible not to. Because everything felt loaded now. Every look. Every pause. Every breath. You didn't feel like an option, he said after a moment. I frowned slightly. What? That night, he clarified, glancing at me. It didn't feel like I was doing something out of character. It didn't feel like I was crossing some line I'd never even thought about before. That was new. I didn't interrupt. Didn't want to. Because this was him actually trying to understand it. It felt. He trailed off, searching for the word. Then, quieter. Easy. There it was. The word I hadn't said out loud. The one that had been sitting in the back of my mind since it happened. I nodded slightly. Yeah. His eyes met mine again. And this time, there was no hesitation in them. That's what scares me, he admitted. Of course it did. Because easy meant it wasn't random. It meant it wasn't forced. It meant it came from somewhere real. My whole life makes sense, he continued, running a hand through his hair again. I know who I am. I know what I want. I had a plan. Had? I echoed. He exhaled sharply. Have. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. And now there's this. He gestured vaguely between us. Thing. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You can say it. He hesitated. This thing between us. That was as far as he could go. For now. I didn't push it. Didn't label it for him. Because I knew, if he got there, it had to be on his own. She's a good person, he said suddenly. I stilled slightly. I know. And I care about her. I know. And I was ready to marry her. That one, lingered. Was. Not M. He noticed it too. I saw it in the way his expression tightened. I am ready, he corrected quickly. I didn't argue. But I didn't agree either. And he caught that. Say it, he said, a little sharper now. I sighed quietly. You want me to tell you you're still 100% sure about everything? Yes. I held his gaze. I don't think you'd be here if you were. That landed exactly how I expected it to. No immediate comeback. No denial. Just silence. Because deep down, he knew. People who are sure don't stand in someone else's kitchen replaying a night they don't remember. They don't avoid their fiancés' calls. They don't stay when they should leave. And they definitely don't look at their best friend like this. I didn't plan for this, he said finally. I gave a small shrug. Yeah. That's kind of how this stuff works. That's not helpful. It's honest. He exhaled again, slower this time. Less sharp. More tired. I don't even know what this is, he admitted. I tilted my head slightly. You don't have to define it right now. But I have to decide what to do about it. Yeah, I said quietly. You do. If I hadn't gotten drunk. He started. I shook my head immediately. Don't do that. Do what? Rewrite it into something easier to deal with. His jaw tightened slightly. I'm trying to understand it. Then don't erase the parts that don't fit. That shut him up. Because he knew exactly what I meant. Theodore looked at me again. Really looked. And this time, there was no confusion left. Just conflict. And something else. Something quieter. Something he still hadn't fully said out loud. Did it feel the same to you? He asked. That question caught me off guard. Not because of what he was asking, but because of how he asked it. Carefully. Like the answer mattered more than he wanted it to. I held his gaze. Yeah, I said. A beat. Then, more honestly. It did. Silence. And this time, it didn't feel like something breaking. It felt like something finally being acknowledged. And that was a lot harder to walk away from. The room felt different after that. Quieter, but not empty. Like something had settled between us that neither of us could pretend wasn't there anymore. Theodore didn't look away this time. And that alone told me everything. Because he always looked away when things got too real. So what now? He asked. That question hung heavier than anything else he'd said so far. Because this was it. Not the past. Not the memory. Not the confusion. This was the part where something had to happen. I leaned back slightly against the counter, exhaling. I don't think there's a clean answer to that. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. That's becoming a theme. Yeah. Silence again. But this one felt different. Less tense. More honest. I keep thinking about it, he admitted. I glanced at him. The night? He shook his head slightly. No, not just what happened. A pause. How it felt. There it was again. That word. Felt. Not what it meant. Not what it looked like from the outside. Just how it felt. And that mattered more than anything else. I didn't interrupt. I've been trying to tell myself it didn't mean anything. He continued quieter now. That it was just alcohol, bad timing, whatever. He let out a slow breath. But it didn't feel like nothing. I held his gaze. No, I said. It didn't. He nodded slightly, like hearing it out loud made it harder to deny. I've kissed people before, he said, almost like he was thinking out loud now. Obviously. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Glad to hear it. That earned a small, fleeting smile. But it faded quickly. It never felt like that, he admitted. And yeah, that one hit. Because I knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't just the physical part. It was the weight behind it. The familiarity. The way it fit in a way it probably shouldn't have. You're my best friend, he said after a moment. I know. And now this is, on top of that. Yeah. He shook his head slightly. Do you have any idea how messed up that is? I gave a small shrug. I've had more time to think about it than you. That made him pause. Since when? I hesitated for half a second. Since before that night. That landed quietly. But deeply. Because it connected everything. Not just the kiss. Not just the moment. But everything leading up to it. So what, you've just been sitting on this? He asked. Pretty much. And you were just fine with it? I let out a small breath. I wasn't planning on doing anything about it. But you did. No, I said steady. You did. That stopped him. Again. Because no matter how much he wanted to shift this into something one-sided, he couldn't. Not anymore. Do you regret it? He asked. That question came out quieter than the others. Careful. Like he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. I didn't hesitate. No. His eyes flicked up to mine. And I could see it, that reaction he didn't quite hide in time. Not shock. Not exactly. Something else. Something closer to relief than he probably wanted to admit. You should, he muttered, but there was no real weight behind it. Why? Because it complicates everything. I shrugged slightly. That doesn't make it wrong. He exhaled, rubbing his face. You're making this very hard to ignore. Good. His eyes snapped back to mine. Good? Yeah, I said. Because ignoring it clearly wasn't working. That landed. Because it was true. He had tried to ignore it. The second he woke up. The second he realized something was off. The second his brain started filling in the blanks. And yet, here he was. Still here. Still asking questions. Still looking at me like that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, he admitted. I nodded. That makes two of us. You seem a lot calmer about it. I gave a small, almost amused huff. That's because I already went through this part. Just, without you. That hit differently. Because now he was realizing. This wasn't new for me. Just newly mutual. He looked down for a second. Then back up. And this time, there was something more settled in his expression. Not resolved. Not even close. But clearer. I can't just pretend this didn't happen, he said. No, I agreed. I also can't just blow up my entire life overnight. I'm not asking you to. That made him pause. You're not? No. I held his gaze. I'm asking you not to lie to yourself about it. That was the line. The boundary. The truth he had to sit with. He nodded slowly. Like he understood that. Like he knew that was the part he couldn't avoid anymore. I need time, he said. Yeah, I replied. You do. And space. That one stung a little. But I nodded anyway. Okay. Because I knew. If this was real, it wasn't going anywhere. He walked to the door again. This time, he didn't stop right away. But before he opened it. Ronnie. Yeah? That night, it wasn't just me, right? I met his eyes. No, I said. And that was all he needed to hear. He nodded once. Then finally, he left. And just like that, everything changed. Even if either of us knew yet what it was changing into. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Not in the peaceful sense. More like the kind of silence that sits heavy in your chest, where everything feels slightly off but nothing has actually happened yet. Theodore didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't show up. And I didn't reach out either. Not because I didn't want to, but because I meant what I said. He needed time. And whatever this was, it wasn't something he rushed without breaking it. By day 3, I started overthinking everything. Which, ironically, was usually his thing. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I should have downplayed it. Maybe giving him space just meant giving him an easy way to walk away from it completely. That last thought stuck the most. Because yeah, that was a real possibility. That he'd choose the simpler version of his life. The one that made sense. The one that didn't involve questioning everything 2 weeks before his wedding. And honestly, I wouldn't have blamed him. It was late evening when I heard a knock on my door. Not a text. Not a call. A knock. That alone told me this wasn't casual. I opened it, and there he was. Theodore looked different. Not in some dramatic way. Just clearer. Like whatever storm had been going on in his head hadn't fully passed. but he'd at least decided to stop running from it. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We stood there for a second. Then I stepped aside. He walked in. Same as that night. Except this time, there was no alcohol to hide behind. "I talked to her," he said. Straight to it. No small talk. My chest tightened slightly. "Okay." He nodded, exhaling slowly. "I didn't tell her everything," he admitted. "But I told her enough." I didn't interrupt. Didn't ask what enough meant. Because I knew that part wasn't about me. "I told her I'm not as sure as I thought I was," he continued. That landed hard. "And?" I asked carefully. "She knew," he said. That surprised me. I frowned slightly. "Knew what?" "That something was off," he clarified. "Not this specifically. But that I've been distant. Different." I nodded slowly. That made sense. Things like this don't just appear out of nowhere. They leak into everything. "She asked me if I still wanted to marry her," he said. I didn't breathe. Not really. And I didn't know what to say. That was the answer. Right there. Not yes. Not immediately. Just silence. "I thought I did," he added quietly. "I really did." Past tense. Again. "And now?" I asked. He looked at me. Really looked. And this time, there was no confusion left. "I don't know what I want," he said. "But I know I can't marry her like this." That was it. The point of no return. I leaned back slightly, processing that. Because this was real now. Not just tension. Not just a moment. Real consequences. "You're sure?" I asked. "I'm sure it wouldn't be fair to her," he said. That was such a Theodore answer. Practical. Considerate. But underneath it, there was something else. Something he still wasn't fully saying. He took a step closer. "And I'm sure about one other thing." My chest tightened slightly. "Yeah?" He held my gaze. "That night wasn't a mistake." There it was. Finally. Not implied. Not danced around. Said. Clear. Steady. Real. The air shifted again. But this time, it didn't feel tense. It felt settled. Like something that had been building since the beginning had finally reached the surface. "That doesn't mean I have everything figured out," he added quickly. "I don't. I know. I don't even know what this makes me. You don't have to label it." "I know," he said. "But I will. Eventually." That sounded like him. Needing to understand. To define. To make sense of it. But for once, he wasn't letting that stop him. "So where does that leave us?" I asked. That question felt different now. Not uncertain. Just open. He exhaled slowly. "I want to try." Simple. But heavy. "Try what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "This," he said, gesturing between us. "Whatever this is. With you." That did it. Because there was no hesitation in that part. I studied him for a second. Not because I doubted him. But because I needed to be sure he wasn't just chasing a feeling without understanding the weight of it. "This isn't going to be easy," I said. "I know. You're going to question it. Second guess it. Probably overthink everything." A faint, familiar smile tugged at his lips. "Yeah. That sounds like me. And I'm not going to be some experiment you figure out and then walk away from." That part mattered. He nodded immediately. "I know. A beat. I'm not treating it like that." I held his gaze. And for the first time since all of this started, I believed him. There was a small moment of silence. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yeah. That night." He hesitated slightly, then pushed through. "If I had remembered everything right away, do you think this would have gone differently?" I thought about it. honestly. Then shook my head. No. He frowned slightly. Why not? Because you'd still feel the same way, I said. A pause. And eventually, you'd have to deal with it anyway. That sat with him. Then he nodded. Slow. Understanding. And then, just like that, we were back in the same position. Standing close. Too close to pretend it didn't mean anything. Except this time. There were no missing memories. No confusion. No excuses. Just two people who knew exactly what they were doing. Theo, I started. But he didn't let me finish. Not like before. Not impulsive. Not uncertain. This time, when he leaned in, it was deliberate. Steady. And when he kissed me, it felt exactly the same. Easy. And that's how I knew. This wasn't just something that happened after a bachelor party. It was something that had been there all along. We just finally stopped pretending it wasn't.